break now to do our senior send-off, gifts and speeches. First up is going to be Jonganzarski.
I was specifically excited for John to get in the group when he did, because John, as I remembered this past week, was the person that convinced me to try for an acapella group in the first place. I found an old Facebook message from him when I was in high school, personally trying to convince me to both go to Fresh Fest and to try for a group. When I visited Binghamton from high school, very nervous and completely disinclined to talk to any students, I remember being approached by only a single person, jonganzarski. He really made me feel comfortable in a place I was very shy and nervous to be. He was just a normal guy doing normal social things. I could do it too. First, he reminded me that he actually grew up in the same neighborhood. He was friends with my cousins, and we would often be there at the same time on the weekends, unaware of each other, playing basketball on different sides of the pavement or something. From not much more than John's in-person advice and Facebook messages, I ended up going to Fresh Fest and trying out the contest. Once in the group, John immediately fit in. While I felt it took some of us a semester or more to settle into the dynamic, John, in a very non-condescending and personal way, I did not mean this, I guess, made his opinions known and his presence feel important. Even as the newest member, he was the oldest, and we all listened to him when we spoke. Maybe it's because John was already much more involved with the Jewish community than many of us, but I always felt John had a greater agenda in mind. Things he wanted to get done in the community, group formulas he wanted to restructure or reimagine. While it was refreshing to watch someone talk to others so confidently and lucidly, it was also, inexplicably, very entertaining to watch someone so clear-headed go about things in a way that just made sense. John had me in peals of laughter one day during sectionals when he described in too much detail the proper gas compensation for drivers going to and from DC. Each driver must fill up at certain times, keep certain receipts, etc., etc. Oh, that makes sense, I probably said. Concentrating much harder on how much he was focusing on doing something the right way. He seemed distressed while telling me this information and baffled that the situation hadn't been figured out beforehand. He was completely right. It was funny no one had thought of this earlier. We all got to know and love John as the driver of our big white van during tours this past year. On the first day of tour, when we were considering renting another car to fit our insane amount of luggage, John figured out a way when nobody else could to fit 16 people's luggage in one row so the other 10 of us could squish in behind it. Every time we packed and unpacked the car, John had to do it by himself because he was the driver, he was often the navigator, and to some, me at least, he seemed like the unofficial father figure. He was so rational, so on point, whenever he spoke that we listened to him even though he had no leadership position. We laughed when he was logical. Why had no one else thought of that? Last semester, Rachel and I, gossiping like fourth graders, would whisper that John was so cool and funny and that we wanted to hang out with him. One day, me and Talia were hanging at John's house and we decided to make cookies. The whole experience was a blast. We couldn't figure out how to make a 3-pound block of chocolate become small enough pieces that we could bake them into the recipe. Talia suggested one thing, I suggested another, John suggested the most reasonable thing, and then we probably said something like, oh, that makes sense. I don't even remember if we used chocolate in the recipes, but the cookies ended up tasting good. So good, in fact, that I wasn't hungry to eat them because I'd eaten so many of the ingredients in the process. During baking, we had forgotten that we had sung together. We were talking about other things, laughing our socks off. John's Gmail profile picture is of him, head bowed, with his hand covering his face, in disbelief of something a clear-headed person like himself could easily fix or restructure. Classic jonganzarski look. While John may often feel up in arms about something he knows better, we just find him and his approach endlessly entertaining, and when we get past the laughter, we also know him to be the constant voice of reason, someone to turn to when there is no one left to write any cricket shit.